Okay, so let's move on to example 2. This one says y is less than negative 3x squared minus 6x minus 7. Notice that it says strictly less than, which means when we go to graph this, we are going to graph it with a dashed line. Also with that, it's saying less than, which means we're going to shade in the area where the y values are getting smaller in reference to the graph. So let's first find the y-intercept, and that's negative 7. So graphing that point. My vertex, if I were to figure it out, would be negative 1, negative 4. Now these are pretty nice, neat points, so I could take that y-intercept and reflect it over the axis of symmetry to get a point here. And you would find that this is a parabola opening downwards and actually never crosses the x-axis, so it doesn't have any zeros. Oops, and I need to graph this with a dashed line, not a solid line, because it says strictly less than. Now, if you were like me and you accidentally graphed it with a solid line but didn't mean to, maybe erase parts of it to make it look dashed, or if you're writing in pen, just draw an arrow that says that should be a dashed line because, well, we're not always perfect and sometimes we make mistakes. Oops, and I just did it again. Here we go. All right, so there's my dashed line for my parabola. Now we want to shade in the area where the y values are getting smaller. And so in this graph, that is going to be here below our vertex. All right, so now let's talk about when we have one variable. When we have one variable, this kind of has a three-step process. Step 1, you're going to write the related equation. Step 2, you're going to solve for x using factoring, quadratic formula, or completing the square. Step 3, we're going to test our x values within some intervals to figure out where the answers actually lie. Because we're dealing with an inequality, so we don't just have one set of answers like x equals 2 and x equals 3. We have a range of answers, so we've got to figure out where is that range. So taking a look at example 3, we have step 1, write the related equation. So we have x squared minus 10x plus 18 is less than or equal to negative 3. So going to step 1, writing the related equation just means rewrite this without the inequality sign, but instead with an equal sign. Now let's go through and solve for x. So I'm going to add my 3 over to give me x squared minus 10x plus 21. And I prefer to factor, but if you don't like factoring and you like one of the other methods, you could use a different method as well, and it would work just as good. Going through and factoring, this is going to factor into x minus 7 and x minus 3. When I solve that for x, I get x equals a positive 7, and oops, I wrote that wrong. And x equals a positive 3. So these numbers of solving for x are what are called critical values, meaning when we go to find our final answer, we're either going to have our answers living inside of those critical values or outside of those critical values. And that's what we got to figure out through step 3. So the original inequality said less than or equal to, so when I go to graph these on my number line, I'm going to graph them with a closed circle. And if it had said just less than or just greater than, I would be graphing it with an open circle. So the closed circle means it could equal that value, and the open circle means it could not equal that value, but could get infinitely close, just like the dashed line versus the solid line. So graphing these values in our interval, I have a point at 7, and I have a point at 3. So now we got to figure out, do our solutions lie inside of these 2 points or outside? And you just have to test at least one number because there's only one option. Either the solutions are in between the 3 and the 7 or outside of the 3 and the 7. So when I pick a number, I like to pick a number that's really easy to deal with. And the easiest number to deal with on the number line, and it's not one of our critical points, is 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to test the point x equals 0. And how I'm going to test that point is I'm going to plug it into the original inequality. So I'm going to have 0 squared minus 10 times 0 plus 18 is less than or equal to negative 3. 0 is so nice because when I simplify this, I get 18 is less than or equal to negative 3. So now we have to determine, is that a true inequality statement or false? Is 18 smaller than or equal to -3? Well, that's false. So because that's false, that means all the values less than 3 are not going to be a part of the solution. And that also means all the values above 7 are not going to be a part of the solution, because it can only be all outside numbers or all inside numbers between those critical points. So because 0 doesn't work and it's an outside number, that means none of the outside numbers are going to work, and only the solutions are in between 3 and 7. So the way we write our final answer then is we are going to say, I'll pick a different color here, x needs to be greater than or equal to 3 or less than or equal to 7. So you can write this as one compound inequality, or if you would prefer to write it as two separate ones, that's okay as well. Either method of writing your answer will be fine.